Hi, this is Paul and welcome to Shading and Rendering. In this lesson, we're going to go over some of the basic techniques of shooting textures in the real world, and we're also going to talk about some of the filters and functions inside of Photoshop that we can utilize to generate textures to use in 3D. So first, I want to talk about just two basic concepts for shooting textures in the real world. The first one I'm going to talk about is when to shoot, and the second one is how to shoot without getting perspective distortion. So first off, when to shoot. Now you'll see these two objects right here. This first one, this first leaf, was actually shot on a very diffuse cloudy day, and the second one over here was shot on a very sunny day. So what basically happens here is if you shoot your textures during a sunny day like this one, what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot of specular highlights. You're going to get a lot of specular light reflected off of this surface, and more than likely you're going to get a lot of shading and shadows in that object as well. So if I needed to utilize this leaf as a texture map, I essentially would have to go in and paint out all of these specular highlights, all of these darker areas, just to even this texture out. Because what's going to happen is inside of 3D, once you get your light sources inside of there, you're going to be generating specular highlights off of those light sources. You're going to be generating shading and shadows from those lights. And right here you would get a double specular highlight. It just wouldn't make any sense because the lighting is already on this leaf, and then you're calculating the lighting on top of that. So it makes for a lot of work if you shoot on a sunny day like this and you pick up all of this shading. Now, if we look at this other one, this one was shot again on a very diffuse cloudy day. And what happens is when you get clouds that are covering up the sun, that sunlight kind of moves through those clouds and it diffuses that light very much like a diffuse light box would do in a studio, if you're familiar with that. But what it basically means is we're not getting all the specular highlights, we're not getting all of the shading information. We're getting a little bit in these areas that we probably would want to paint out, but it's very minimum compared to what we have here. You have so much detail inside of this leaf with all of these veins and stuff that to paint this out would just take you forever, and you probably wouldn't get a very good result out of it anyway. So you will save yourself a lot of time if you just shoot your stuff like this during a very diffuse cloudy day and just eliminate all of that shading information on there. All right, now second, I want to talk very briefly about how to shoot objects. Now, this leaf was shot with, I'm going to guess, a 35 millimeter, just a basic lens that's on a camera. And for something like this is fine. We're not going to notice a lot of perspective distortion inside of here. However, if you're shooting something like a brick wall where you'll have a lot of parallel lines, if you shoot with a 35 normal lens, you're going to get a lot of perspective distortion inside of that image. Meaning those parallel lines in between the bricks, they're going to start to bend on the top and distort just because of the perspective that you're shooting. Now, a way to alleviate this problem and to keep all of those lines in between the bricks very, very straight, what you can do is shoot with a longer lens, a telephoto lens, and get a further distance away from the wall. So the further you can get away from the wall and the more telephoto lens you can use, the less perspective distortion you're going to have. So you're going to keep all of those lines nice and straight. Trying to get rid of perspective distortion on something like a brick wall, where everything is very, very parallel, is going to be very difficult inside of Photoshop. And if you repeat that texture of that brick wall over the entire surface, you're going to see a lot of problems with that repeat on that. So again, use a more telephoto lens and get as far away from the object as you possibly can, and that'll save you a lot of time. All right, so now on to Photoshop. I want to talk a bit about channels and what channels do inside of Photoshop and how that affects us inside of Maya. So there's a few different images that we can use, or images formats. Right now, this image that we have here is currently an RGB format, meaning we have 3 channels of information inside of here. We have a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel. And when those 3 channels are combined together, we get the final image. So if I go up here to image mode, you see a few of them in here. The ones that we are most concerned with are grayscale. Now if I turn this to grayscale, you're going to see that we have 1 channel in here now, and it is pure gray. That's it. All right, so undo that. And I will now go to a CMYK color. And you'll notice that we do have a cyan, magenta, yellow, and black color channel. And again, they combine to the CMYK. K stands for black, by the way. Now, this format is primarily used for printing. When you print, you use 4 different colors of inks. You use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And again, those are combined to generate these specific colors. Now, you'll notice that when I switch from RGB to CMYK, you'll notice there was a fairly large color shift. I'll undo this. You can see that the green specifically gets a lot duller when we go to CMYK. Red gets a little bit more dull, not as drastic as the green does. And blue dulls down quite a bit as well. Reason for this is because the color space between your computer screen, or more specifically, these colors are generated by light. That color space is a lot different than what can be generated with ink. In the CMYK printing process, this is probably the most vibrant green that can be generated. As opposed to this green just cannot be generated in a CMYK color space. So that's why you see the shift between those. But the most important thing to note now is that we do have the cyan channel, magenta channel, yellow, and black. And those are combining to generate the CMYK. All right, we'll move down. The other one we're concerned about is lab color. Now, lab color works a little differently. You actually have 2 color channels. You have a color A and a color B, and you have a lightness channel. We don't normally use this in production other than one specific thing, and we'll get to that when we start talking about repeating textures. We can utilize this color space, this lightness channel specifically, to really help us out when we're generating seamless textures. All right, so we'll jump back here. Now, just a quick bit about what these channels actually are. If you notice here, again, do keep in mind we have pure red, pure green, pure blue, pure white, and pure black. So if I go and just look at the red channel, you can see that it appears as purely white, as does the white channel. Inside of each of these channels, you have a possible of 256 levels of gray. So it ranges from 0 to 255 technically, but just keep in mind that there are 256 levels of gray inside of this. Now, that 256 levels of gray refers to an 8-bit image. And if you look up here, in the title, we do have a little 8 right here specifying that this is an 8-bit image. And you'll see things like 16-bit images, 32-bit images, and what that does is it ups the amount of information that's in each of these channels. So again, for our purposes right now, this is an 8-bit image, and we have 256 levels of gray inside of this red channel. Now, we also have 256 levels of gray inside of the green channel as well. And you'll notice again that the green channel is purely white, meaning it's getting a full amount or a level of 255 inside of this area. And in the white, you can see that it is as well. So we know by seeing that and by looking at the blue channel that this is white over here, that pure white in each, or excuse me, 255 level in red, a level of 255 in green, and in blue as well. So Pure blue, pure green, and pure red generates white. So this would be the exact opposite if we were printing, where if you had CMYK, pure cyan, magenta, and red is going to generate that black. So it's the difference between a subtractive process and an additive process. But for our purposes, again, just note that pure red, pure green, and pure blue equals white. Now, in the real world, again, working with light, if you were to, say, do lighting on a stage, and you were to take a light with a red gel on it, turning the light red, and a light with a green gel, and a light with a blue gel, if you were to shine them on top of each other, you would actually get white light on the stage. So again, that same basic process. So here's our red channel, here's our green channel, here's our blue channel. Now, we are actually viewing these right now in the gray representation of what those are. You can actually go into the preferences and change this to see the colors as well. So if you would prefer to see the blue, to see the green, to see the red, you can go in the Photoshop preferences and see this as red, green, and as blue. All right, now, those are our color channels. Now, we also have what is called an alpha channel. And you can see I do have an alpha channel down here. You can see what it looks like. Again, in an 8-bit image, this is 256 levels of gray. Now, what this basically means is an alpha channel. It actually means a couple of different things. Inside of Photoshop, this is essentially a selection that is stored. So if I was to go in, let's say we'll jump back into our color here. And if I was to grab maybe my lasso tool and make a selection, like so, I can store this selection as an alpha channel so I can bring it up later on. If I was to go to channels and I was to click this button right here, you can see it actually did save that selection as an alpha channel. Now, in order to bring these channels up as a selection again, all I have to do is go in and control click on this little box right here where this selection is, or this alpha channel is, and you'll notice that my cursor changes. I have a little finger right here, a little hand with a finger sticking out. When I hold control, it kind of brings up this little marquee selection looking thing on there. So if I click on that, you can see that it does actually bring up the little marching ant looking things, and that selection is now loaded again. All right, I'll go ahead and get rid of this one, and let's see what this basically means for us inside of Maya, and what we do with all of this information. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this file. Now, the important thing to remember right now is that this file that I save, it just has one layer, so it's totally flattened. And inside the channels, I have a red channel, a green channel, a blue channel, and I have this alpha channel with this elliptical shape inside of it. So I will go ahead and save that. And I will just save that as a TIFF file. And I want to make sure that my alpha channels are saved in there. Now, when we bring this inside of Maya, do keep in mind that we can have more than one alpha channel saved inside of here, but Maya is only going to recognize the top one, channel number 4, as this is labeled right here. So it won't see the other ones that you have in here. So a good practice when you're saving your files out, just make sure that if you are going to use an alpha channel, that you do just have one inside of there. So I'll go ahead and save this as, actually I already have it saved, channel demo done. But you're going to want to make sure that alpha channels is selected. I'll go ahead and just save and write over the existing one. And let's jump in Maya. And we'll scale some of this down a little bit. Give ourselves a little bit of room to work with. All right, I'll go ahead and create just a polyplane. We'll scale that up a little bit. And we're going to generate a new blend surface and put it on there. And I'm going to go ahead and jump in the color channel, and we're going to put that texture in that color channel just as normal, not as a projection. Okay, so channel demo done, there it is, and we'll open that. And you can see what happens here is, let me open this a little bit more, just give ourselves a little room. Okay, so you'll see that the connection that was made here, we have two specific connections. This first one down here, and if I mouse over it, you can see that the file 1, which is that file texture that I just brought in, and you can see there's the file 1 node right there. So file 1, the attribute that's coming out of that is the out color. So this is basically saying that the RGB information, all three channels, are coming out of this file 1 node, and it's going into the blend 1 node, specifically into the color attribute. So getting used to this whole naming convention on what's going on with the nodes will really help you out. And just starting to recognize those is a very, very good thing. So, you know, again, if you're not familiar with it, all nodes in Maya, they're basically storage bins for information. And that information is referred to as attributes. So you have a node with attributes, and you can connect those attributes. So right here we are again connecting the out color or the RGB information from the file 1 into the color attribute of the blend 1. All right, now if I look up here, I've got file 1 out transparency is going into the blend 1 transparency. And that is why you can see, remember we did have a plane right here, and now we're seeing that alpha channel that we had inside of Photoshop is cutting that out. So if I look in here, you can see that we do have an incoming connection into the color, and we do have an incoming connection into the transparency as well. So you can see those connections there. You can see them over here. You can mouse over it to see what's going on. Now, anytime that you save a file out of Photoshop as like a TIFF file, like I just did, and you have an alpha channel in there, when you bring that in to the color channel, Maya is going to automatically assume that you're going to want to use that alpha channel to cut that out, to use it as transparency. I have found, you know, sometimes that's the case. More often than not, that's not the case. And let's just say, for example, in this case, that that isn't what we want. So very simply, all I would have to do is just drag over this whole connection right here and just hit delete, and now we are no longer utilizing that alpha channel inside of there. All right, so to go a little further with this, let's make a couple of different connections here and kind of see what they do. Again, right now, we are actually utilizing the RGB information that's coming out of this. Now, that's not always going to be the case, and it depends on which attribute you're actually connecting. For example, notice this connection is green, kind of a pale green right now. If I was to take this file and drag it over to the specular color, so you can see my out color is going into specular color right now. Again, right now, this is a color value. It's utilizing the red, the green, and the blue channel to generate what that specular color is going to be. However, if I try a different one, like specular roll-off, for example, now this won't utilize the RGB information, and you notice that my connection is a different color. It's kind of a purplish color. If I mouse over this, you can see now that my file 1 out alpha is going into the spec roll-off. So right now Maya is saying, all right, take the alpha information that's inside of there and pump that into the specular roll-off attribute. So at this point, I do have an alpha channel in this file, so it is utilizing that alpha information to generate that. Well, what happens if you do not have an alpha channel in this file? What is Maya going to do? Well, we have a little connection down here. And where is that? Pardon me, I'm on the wrong node. That would help out. You have to be on the file node itself. Sorry about that. And this is going to be under the color balance. And under color balance, you have this little checkbox right here that says alpha is luminance. Now, luminance refers to the light and the dark values of that specific image. So if I do not have an alpha channel inside of my image, we're going to want to click this on and just say, just make an alpha on your own inside of here, but use the luminance value of this image right here. So you don't technically have to have an alpha channel inside of there. Now, let's look at what happens here. I'll go ahead and delete my color channel right here, the connection between those. And let's look at what we have here. We'll make a fairly high spec content here. And right now, the specular roll-off, or the overall intensity of my specular highlight, does have this mapped into it. So right now, we do not have alpha is luminance checked. So we are actually using the alpha channel coming out of here. And you can see that, again, out alpha is connected into the spec roll-off. Let's do a quick render of this here and see what we get. So you can see that we do have a higher specular content inside of here as opposed to what we have here. So it is actually utilizing the alpha channel to generate what is specular and what is not. Now, we are in the spec roll-off channel, so essentially we are getting no specular highlight here, and because our alpha channel is pure white, we are getting 100% intense specular highlight inside of this area. All right, let's size this down a little bit. And instead of doing that, let's go ahead and select that, and we'll do alpha is luminance. So now, instead of using the alpha channel, we're using the luminance, or the light and dark values of this image. And you can see here that our white area that we have is getting full specular value. Our dark areas inside the lettering are getting no specular value whatsoever. So very, very important that you understand, again, inside of Maya, what is going on with these channels and how they're being connected. Because different things are going to take RGB values, different things are going to take alpha values. So playing around with those and recognizing the difference between them and the connections that it's making will really help you out when you're building your shading networks like this. All right, so let's move on here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this object, and we're going to go into some different techniques, some tricks inside of Photoshop that'll really help you out. I'm going to go ahead and make a NURB sphere, and we'll go ahead and scale that up a little bit. And I'll go ahead and just generate a new surface. I'll do a Lambert just so we don't have to look at the specular highlight on this. And I'm going to go ahead in the color channel, put a file in there. And we'll put a texture on there. So there you can see our texture. Looks like we're kind of stretching along this edge right here. So I'll go ahead and go into my Place 2D node, and I'll rotate this by 90 degrees just so we can even that texture out a little bit. All right, now, if I look up on top of this object, you can see that we have quite a bit of stretching going on here. And that's just by the nature of the object. Again, all NURB surfaces have to have 4 edges, and all of those edges are being pinched, squeezed into a pull right up here. So all that texture as well is being squeezed into that area. So obviously this is undesirable, and we need to go in and fix this. You'll notice down here at the bottom, we're getting the same effect, like so. All right, so in order to fix this, we have a really cool filter, a distortion filter inside of Photoshop that we're going to use. So let's close this one, and I'll go ahead and open this, and there you can see the texture that we have. Now, this is one exception to the rule that we talked about earlier, to where your textures should be in a power of 2, meaning 512, 1024, 2048, and so on. And you generally should keep them square. Now this one, you'll notice, is a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning the width is double what the height is. And the reason for this is just because of the way that it's being projected onto this object right here. Essentially what you're getting is you are getting one edge that's wrapping around 180 degrees. So there's 180 degrees around there, and it's going around a full 360 degrees. So in order to keep the aspect ratio true on this, meaning I'm not stretching it out at all, it works best to do it as a 2-to-1 ratio in this fashion. It'll wrap around that object and keep everything true to what it needs to be. Now, however, this filter that we're going to do on this works best if you do it as a perfectly square object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to image size, and you can see that I do have 2048 by 1024. So I have a 1K by 2K image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bump this up to a 2K by 2K image. Now, granted, I'm going to get a lot of stretching when I do this, but we'll bring it back down once we're done with this filter. So I'll say OK on that, and you can see the obvious stretching that's happened here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Filter, we're going to go to Distort, and we're going to do Polar Coordinates. And inside of Polar Coordinates, what we want to do is we want to take this image from a rectangular fashion into a polar fashion. So if I click on OK, you can see what I get here. Very, very similar to what we would see at the top of the object that we just had in in Maya, if I look here. So you can see this thing that we have going on here, we've basically simulated that inside of here. So now all I really have to do is jump in, and for this example, I'll go ahead and just grab the rubber stamp clone tool. And I can go in and start to clone some of this information out. Of course, you'll want to take more time doing it than I am doing here. Like so. All right, so we'll call that good. And now what I want to do is I want to take this polar image and I want to go back to rectangular. So I will go back into Distort, Polar Coordinates, Polar to Rectangular, and I'll say OK. And you can see up top here how we've really kind of stretched all of this information out and what that looks like. It's very, very cool. All right, so we've done the top. Now we need to do the bottom. So this Polar Coordinates filter only works on the top of the image. So in order to do the bottom, we're going to have to rotate this around. So image, rotate canvas, and we'll rotate it 180 degrees. We'll jump back into the Polar Coordinates filter, rectangular to polar. Jump in here a little bit. I'll grab my clone tool and we'll bring some of this information in. And that's probably fine for now. All right. Once again, we'll jump back and change this back to rectangular. So there you can see that one's corrected. Of course, you're going to want to rotate this back 180 degrees to where it was. And we're going to go ahead and take this back down to 1024. And there you go. So at this point, we'll go ahead and save this image out. And I'll go ahead and just write over this one I've already done. And we'll jump back into Maya. And inside of Maya, we'll grab this file texture. And we'll go ahead and replace that with the one that's done. and you can see that it fixed all of those areas. So there's our pole right there. Looks like I have a little bit of an issue coming right there that I need to fix. But the point is we've pretty much fixed all of that pinching that we have coming through there. So very, very useful filter when it comes to taking care of problems like that. All right, let's jump back into Photoshop here. I'm going to make a new document. And that document, I'll go ahead and do a 1K 1024 by 1024. We'll do RGB color. And I just want to show you a couple of very helpful things that we can utilize here to generate textures. These are going to be under filter. And we're going to go under the render. And we're going to do render clouds, difference clouds, and fibers for this one. First off, let's go to clouds. Now, you can see that I get some cloudy texture. Now, by itself, this is a pretty hideous texture. It's very, very apparent that this was generated by a computer. It's just using some form of a fractal noise pattern. So, I don't think I would ever actually use this as is, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with these. Now, first off, you'll notice that we did get black and white clouds when I did this. That is because my foreground and background colors are on black and white. If I was to go in here and change my foreground and my background color to something else, maybe like that, and I went in and rendered those clouds again, you can see that it actually does utilize those colors that I have in there. Now, one really cool thing about this is if you actually use a texture size or document size that is based off of a power of 2, like 1024 by 1024, this is going to automatically repeat. So you won't have any seam issues if you repeat this over a surface. As long as you keep it as that. If you do 2048, it's going to repeat. But it'll only do that if you use a texture size like that. All right, now another one that we have inside of here is the difference clouds. Now difference clouds, we'll do one on this, and you can see what it does is it adds clouds on top of the existing clouds and uses a difference blend mode to generate those. You can get some really, really interesting textures moving like this with the difference clouds, especially if you're doing colors. You can get some really crazy stuff going on here. And of course, you can jump in and do other things like maybe adjusting the levels on this to pull some of this out. Again, all I'm really after here is just to kind of show just some cool things that we can do here. And really, your imagination is your limit on this one, just because there's so many cool filters and stuff that we can do with this. All right, so I'll go ahead and cancel that. And let's talk about some other stuff we can do with this image. If I jump in here and go to maybe just artistic colored pencil, you're going to see that you get this window that opens up that just has a ton of different things that you can do here. And you'll notice that you do have some parameters that you can set here. And once you get what you like, go ahead and just hit this OK button. So right now we're on colored pencil, and I can change the width of the pencil, the pressure of the stroke, how bright the paper is. I would recommend just go through and play with some of these. Here's cutout paper, dry brush, neon glow, plastic wrap. It looks really cool here. You can get some nice, nasty, gooey stuff going on. But again, you know, for our purposes for 3D, we're essentially generating specular highlights and shading in here. So it's going to have limited usage for what we do in 3D. For 2D, pretty cool stuff, really. Pastels, poster edges, again, just go through and play with some of these. You can generate some really cool textures inside of these. So again, my point here is to just really get you guys to notice that this stuff is here and that you have this inside of your toolbox to use. I'll go ahead and just hit OK, that's fine, and then it generates what it needs to. So those are clouds. So that's one cool thing you can do. Now another cool thing is we have this fibers, and that's just under the clouds. And fibers, you can see that it is going to generate some fibrous looking material. You can vary the variance in it, which basically translates to how long are these strokes inside of the fibers, or how long are the fibers. And the strength is going to be kind of like the contrast, how gritty those are. So I'll just click OK on that. And you can see that, we've got the beginnings of a lot of stuff here, of cloth, of bark on a tree. So again, creativity here is key, and knowing what filters you have inside of Photoshop. You could even go in and mess with some of the blurs, like a motion blur. You can see we can blur it across horizontally. You can start getting into some cloth effects. If you bring it straight up and down, you can see we can start getting into some brushed metal effects, even though I do have a better way to do brush metal, which I'll show you in a minute. But again, just so you start to recognize some of this stuff inside of here. This would be great for like a linen cloth. All right, so let's go ahead and just fill that with white again. And the last one I want to show here is noise. Add noise specifically. You can do a lot with this one. You got a couple different options here. If I turn off monochromatic, you can see that I am just getting a bunch of colored random noise inside of there. Monochromatic is just going to make it black and white. Now, distribution, you can do it in a Gaussian fashion or a uniform fashion. The only difference that I particularly know on this one is Gaussian, Gaussian, whatever, tends to be a little higher contrast on them. But I don't particularly notice that big of a difference between them. So I'll go ahead and add that noise, and I'm going to go back to blur, and I'm going to do that motion blur on this. And you can see here, the distance that you're blurring on this. Again, we're making brush metal here. The distance is how what the length is on that brush metal in between those. So you can see the further we go, the more we're going to be blurring that out. Now you'll notice that the edges don't get it blurred out as much as the center does. So do keep this in mind. If you are generating a 1K texture, you've got a couple options here. Obviously, this is unusable at this point right here. Now, we did make this texture 1K. So if you did want to utilize this, probably what I would do is go ahead and just select this inner region. If you do a Control-T, that'll take you to the transform, which is Edit Free Transform, by the way. And you can then just pull this out a little bit to stretch that, double click it, and you've got a brushed aluminum or brushed metal texture. Now another way that you can do that is just make your document bigger than it needs to be and crop down to your 1K texture map. But I think that's probably the easiest route to go. All right, now another thing that you can do with this noise, which is a very cool one, we'll just add some noise back in there. And I'll zoom in here a little bit. It's pretty rough right now, and what I'm getting at here is kind of going for that manufactured bump map look, where objects, maybe like your computer monitor, the plastic on there is a good example. If you look at it from a distance, it appears to be fairly smooth, but once you get right up on it, just from the manufacturing process, it tends to be fairly bumpy. Little teeny tiny bumps, and generating a map like this is great for doing those little tiny bumps inside of there. This is a little harsh at this point, so probably I would go in and do a little Gaussian blur on that. Probably not that much, somewhere around this range, just so I get rid of all of those really hard edges that I have going on there. And this would work out really, really nice for that type of a bump map. All right, so that's about it for now. I mean, again, you really just have to jump in and just play with those and just discover what's in there with all of those filters and what you can do with them. But hopefully those couple examples will give you some general ideas. All right, so let's talk about repeating textures a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and open up an image here. Let's see, we'll open up this one. And as far as repeating textures go, you got to pay attention when you're shooting textures with your camera. This is a hideous image. This is a terrible image to try to make repeat. And that's kind of why I chose it, just because it is going to be very difficult to get this thing to repeat. Some of the things that you want to avoid when you're doing repeating textures is stuff like this. Areas that are going to really stand out on that texture. I mean, obviously, this big white splotch that we have here, if you repeat this texture, we're going to have a white splotch, a white splotch, a white splotch. In fact, if I jump into Maya right here, let's just do a little test on this. I'll go ahead and create a, what do I want here? I'll just do a NURBS plane. That'll be easy. And I'll go ahead and put that texture map that I just had in Photoshop. Go ahead and put that on there. So there you can see our texture. Now, if I was to go in and repeat this a couple times, well, you can see that one's bad enough. I mean, clearly we're getting white splotch, white splotch, white splotch, let alone this big bolt that we have going on here. But while we're here, if you take a peek at this, you can see that, even if we didn't have those things in there, we still can't repeat this texture. We've got a lighter area here butting up against a darker area here. So this texture clearly would not repeat. We need to do a lot of work to this thing. All right, so let's jump back into Photoshop here. And first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and crop this a little bit and just get a little bit better area. Maybe for this one, we'll just go right about here and try to avoid those areas. I like what we have for this texture inside of here. And I'll double click that. Let's check our image size and see what we have. So we have 840 by 840. So at this point in time, the best I can do with this image is either A, keep it at 840, B, I take this down to a 512 by 512, or C, I up this to a 1K, to a 1024, 1024. Now, obviously, bringing this up, I'm going to blur out this image a little bit just because I'm upsizing this, and it is going to interpolate those pixels and resample them, and it will blur that out a little bit. So keep this in mind when you're shooting your textures out in the real world, that if you are going to repeat this, you're going to need a decent size image. Now for this, just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and do this at 1024, 1024, knowing I probably shouldn't, but for this demo, this is what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it looks like it didn't blur it out too terribly bad. We lost a little bit of the crispness inside of here, but again, for this demo, it's fine. So we have a 1024 by 1024 texture map here. Now, there's a very cool little utility inside of Photoshop that we can use to check and see if this is going to be tileable. Technically we could save this out and we could bring it back into Maya to see what it looks like when it's tiled across, as it's repeating across our surface. But we might as well just kind of do it inside of here and save us a little bit of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Filter, and we're going to go into Other, and we're going to do the Offset function. Now what this is going to do is, by default, this is going to be set to 0, 0, and sorry, I just hit, there we go. It's going to offset or move these pixels vertically and horizontally. So if I have this set to background and I move all of these pixels right, say, well, let's move them half the distance. We're at 1024, so if I go 512, you can see that it moved all of that 512. Now obviously we lost all of the stuff that would have ended up over here because it moved it over. But you'll notice that it is putting the background color inside of what's left. Now, if I move them down 512, of course it moved it down, and we get the background in that area as well. Okay, so we've got another option here, which is repeat edge pixels. And what that is going to do is it's going to take the pixel that's right on the edge here and just repeat it in that direction. Not very useful to us. The one that we want is the wraparound. And it's basically going to say that anything we push off the edge is just going to come right back around. And essentially what we have is what our edges are going to look like when we repeat that inside of Maya across our surface. So great way to check and see if our texture is repeatable or not. And obviously at this point in time, this is not repeatable. This is going to look terrible inside of Maya. All right, I'll cancel that just so we have an untouched image. We know that it's a problem. You can clearly see light area here, dark up there. And we're going to go in and make this repeatable. All right, so in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to change the mode of this from RGB back to that one that I talked about earlier. We're going to go into Lab Color. And you can see that we do have a B color channel, we have an A color channel, and we have a lightness color channel. This lightness color channel is the one that we want to alter. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a Control A to select all of this lightness. Make sure you have lightness selected, by the way. Control C to copy it. Control N to make a new document. Now, because I copied this, the new document will be the correct size. You can turn this to grayscale or RGB. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, really. It's going to do about the same thing. And I will go ahead and say OK. And now we're going to Control V to paste that inside of there. So again, that was Control A to select it, or to select all, Control C to copy it, Control N for new document, and Control V to paste that inside of there. All right, so here's our new document. Let's look at our layers. We've got that on a different layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and dupe this layer by dragging it down to this little icon right here. And that will make a copy of that layer. Now this copy is what we're going to be working on. So what we want to do is we want to go in and we want to try to even out some of these values inside of here. We've got kind of a medium gray in here. It gets lighter up here, darker up here. We want to even these out without getting rid of all of the detail that we have inside of this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this duplicate and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to blur that. I'm going to go to Gaussian blur here. And I want to really, really blur this thing out. We want just an overall sampling of the value in here. So I'm going to crank this up to like 30. So we'll just hit 30. That's fine. And you can see now we have, once this is blurred out, we can really see that dark area there. The lighter areas inside of here. Gets a little darker down here and over in this corner. So I'll click on OK. Now, in order to even this out, what I want to do is I want to reverse all of this and blend it right back on top of this one to even those values out. So what I will do to invert all of these values is I'll do a Control I. I believe that's under Image Adjustments, Invert right there. And you can see now we've inverted that. So we have light areas up here now, down in this corner, and still maintaining a somewhat medium gray inside of here. So we've essentially just blurred it out, we inverted it, and now we have the complete opposite of what we have down on here. Now what we want to do is we want to blend this right on top of here, and we're going to start getting into some of the blend modes that we have. I'm going to talk more about blend modes a little bit later, but for now, what we want to do is we want to take this top layer and we want to go to our blend modes here and we want to overlay that one on top of this one. So this one is overlaid on that. And if I turn the visibility off of this, you can kind of see what that did. See how it's starting to even that out a little bit. So there's before and there's after. It's really starting to, like, watch up in this area how it's starting to even that out a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and right click on this layer and I'm going to merge it down into this one. Okay, we can go ahead and check this now if we want. We can go ahead and go back to that offset again. And we'll do 512 by 512. And you can see here that we got a little bit closer. We still have a little bit of dark area inside of here. We're starting to get some of these. I'll go ahead and cancel that. And I'm going to dupe this layer again, once again by dragging it down to this one. Go in, blur it. I will Control I to invert it again. And we'll overlay it on top of that one. Once again, we'll merge it down. And I'll do this a couple times. So I'll go ahead and blur that, invert it, overlay it, and merge it down. And let's see where we are now. Now again, keep in mind, notice we're not getting rid of any of the detail that's inside of here. Here's our original. Here's where we are now. Notice all of this detail is still inside of this image. All right, let's go in and offset that again. And notice now by doing that, 3 or 4 times, you can barely tell where the edge is. Now, granted, we do need to do a little bit of work on this seam right here where the textures don't match, but what we're doing now is just dealing with the overall quality of the shading across the texture. All right, so I'll cancel that and we'll call that good. Now what I want to do is, again, I want to Control A to select all of this layer here, Control C to copy it. I'll jump back to my original, go into the channels, make sure lightness channel is selected, and as you can probably guess, I'm going to Control V to paste it inside of there. Now that's pasted inside of there, and let's look at what we have. So there's our texture now, and let's go ahead and do that offset again. All right, much better. And you can see here that we've got some texture that's not matching up here, but the overall shading across the surface is pretty much perfect at this point. If you squint a little bit is kind of a good telltale sign of if the value is working or not. And if I squint, I can see that the color isn't matching up, but the shading is across it, so that's good. All right, I'll go ahead and undo. We want to talk about these seams right now. I'll go ahead and close this one down. We don't need him open anymore. And actually, before I undo that, let's jump in here. And I want to show you a couple things. Typically right now, we would just grab our clone tool or rubber stamp, whatever it's called in here. And we would go in and start sampling some areas and cloning it over to here. Now, here's the problem with this. Cloning is actually really bad in this capacity inside of Photoshop. If I go in here and start sampling some of this and blending this in like so, what you're going to find is, and it's kind of hard to tell on this image, but you'll start to get kind of blurry seams, and that's because of the nature of the brush. The brush that we're using is a soft edge, it's feathered out, and so it's copying those pixels over, and the stuff just gets really blurry as we start to do that. So a better route that we can do for this is I'm going to undo. There we go. So we're back to before we did the offset on this. I'm going to go to layers and I'm going to dupe this layer. All right, so we've got this one and this one. Now I'll turn this one off and we'll look at the background. I'll go ahead and offset that again. So now you can see we've got our seams here. Now I'm going to turn this one back on, and what I'm going to do is grab my eraser, maybe bring this up a bit, And instead of cloning across these seams on this bottom one, I now have this that I'm just going to start, that was the wrong layer, sorry. Make sure on the top layer, I'm going to start just erasing some of this information that I have inside of here, just to get that to be seamless, like so. So you can see what I did. I just kind of erased some of these areas inside of there. And then bringing that back on just works a lot better than doing the cloning function inside of there. All right, so this should work out quite nicely. I will go ahead and merge this down. And I'm going to go ahead and save this out. We'll just save it as a TIFF file. We'll call this for repeat done. And I'll save that. And let's jump into Maya and just see what this looks like here. Go ahead and select that. And I want for repeat done. And it looks like we've got something funky going on here. We may have to troubleshoot this a little bit. Let's jump back. You know what? First things first. Let's delete that. And figure out what the problem is. We'll jump into File. And for repeat done. All right, so still looks a little strange. Let's jump back into Photoshop and see what we've got going on here. And what we have here, one very, very important function that we forgot to do. We are still in lab color space. So we need to change this back to RGB color space. And I will go ahead and save this again. And we'll jump back into Maya, reload that, and everything should be good. All right, now you'll notice that this does repeat quite well across this surface if I change these. So pretty indistinguishable at this point as to where one starts and the other ends. Now we do have a little bit of an issue with, like, say, this little area right here where the paint is chipped away, because you can start to see that repeating across here. And you know, if we repeat this a lot of times, that's going to become pretty noticeable. Once we jump in here, you can start to see those, and it just looks like the same piece repeating over and over. So be very, very careful with areas like this when you're doing those. All right. Let's jump back into Photoshop, and we'll go ahead and close this one down. I want to talk about blend modes a little bit and what we can do with these. Really, really important that you understand what blend modes are and what they're doing. Okay, so let's open up. Let's see. Let's open up this one and this one. So we've got two textures that we can work with here. Nice trowel texture and a nice stucco texture. And let's go ahead and open up. Let's see here. I want to open up a logo file. We'll open up this. This will work out nice. All right, so we've got an AVS logo. And you'll notice that I do have an alpha channel in there that I can use as selection to cut that out. So again, let's control click on that selection. Let's drag it over to our texture. Just bring that down and out of the way. All right, so we've got this on a separate layer, our little logo on here. And let's check out some of the blend modes that we can do with this, just to get this to blend in. We want this to look like this logo was painted on top of this wall. That's our goal. And blend modes are great for this stuff, getting this stuff to blend in here. So you have a couple choices. You can go in and just click on these at random and play with them. But a really cool thing that I like to do is if you just click in this box and make sure that it's highlighted, meaning you see this dark area right here. If I now start hitting the up and down keys on my keyboard, you can see I can go from normal Click, I go to dissolve, darken, and you can go through these very quickly to see how these blend in. Now, I'm not going to go over the actual mathematical equations on how these blend in, but just know that it is taking color values, and it's either adding them from the color that's underneath it, it's subtracting, it's multiplying, different stuff like that. But you can see as I'm going through here, now I hit overlay, and overlay looks great. Overlay looks like that is painted on there. Soft light, actually I think I like a little bit better. Notice in overlay my white areas of this logo kind of blend in a little bit too much, as opposed to the soft light, it retains the natural color of this logo. But the point is look at how well this blends into this. It blends in very nicely. Now, one thing that I don't really care about here is, maybe I want this to be a little more vibrant. Maybe it's a little too faded out and aged looking for what I want to do here. Well, there's no reason why you can't just dupe this layer and have another one on top of it, and now we have two layers that are both set to soft light, and you can see we're still getting some of that texture coming through, and it blends in nicely, but we're getting a lot more vibrant paint on top of there. So blend modes are amazing. Get used to these because there are so many cool things that you can do. All right, let's do this again. Maybe let's just take this layer and we'll drag it on top of this one. And you can see that, once again on this texture, this blends in very, very nicely on top of here. Now, we've kind of got that faded paint look going on with this one. And the problem here is everything is still a little too perfect. Everything looks a little too neat around the edges. The overall paint itself is just way too uniform as it moves across here. So we do want to adjust some of this value in here and strip some of this paint away per what's going on inside of the surface. All right, so what I'm going to do is, rather than grabbing a Photoshop brush and start, getting rid of some of this, ultimately it just ends up looking photoshopped at that point. For example, if I grab a eraser brush, and I can start getting rid of some of these, but it just looks way too uniform and doesn't look natural. Now, another route that you could go would be to go in and grab some of these brushes like this one, and we can use this to start to strip away some of that. And ultimately what you're going to get out of this is you're going to look like you used a Photoshop brush to get rid of this stuff. And it just doesn't look natural. Again, it just looks like you Photoshopped it. So a much better route to go in this instance. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do this, because there are certain situations where we can utilize that, and I'll show you in a minute. But what's going to happen on a surface is you're going to have varying degrees of denseness inside of the surface. You're going to have different weathering that's going to happen. For example, in here, you've got this crack moving through here that it looks like there's some moisture that is residing inside of this crack. Probably the paint is going to be stripped away in this area more than this area. More than likely, if you have crevices in there, that's going to wear and weather differently than other areas of the surface. So essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to utilize this surface to strip away some of the paint. Now, if I look at this, we've got some variance in tone going on here. That we can utilize. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-A to select all of my image. I'm going to go into channels, and I'm going to click on this little button right here, which is going to create a new channel. And I'm going to Control-V to, I don't think I copied that. I have my old selection in there. I'm going to go ahead and delete that information. Go back here, select all, Control-C to copy this time. And inside of alpha, I will go ahead and paste that information inside of there. So this information right now we're going to utilize this grayscale value, all these grayscale values, to use as a selection to strip away some of the paint on our logo. Now, right now, we have this set very much across here. It's kind of a 50% gray. So if I was to use this as a selection right now, let's just give it a shot and see what it does. Remember, this is an alpha channel, so I can use it as a selection now. Control, click on the alpha, and you get a bazillion little marching ants all over this surface. Makes it very, very hard to see what you're doing when you're painting and stripping away stuff. So a good practice that I'm going to show you that you really, really need to pay attention to, because you'll screw yourself up really bad here. It can cause problems later on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all of these little marching ants, and I do that by doing Control H, or hide selection. I believe that's under select. Heck, I don't know where it is. Doesn't really matter. Control H is a lot easier anyway. Just think H for hide. So Control H hides all of those. It is still selected. I'll go up to layers, turn on my logo, make sure it's selected, and you can do one of two things. I can hit delete to strip that away. Now notice it's just a very uniform strip as it does it, and that is because our alpha channel is so just, medium gray across the whole surface. So it's not really doing a whole lot for us at this point in time. Now another thing that you can do as well back inside of here is you can grab your eraser tool and start to strip away some of this stuff in here. So again, we have such a medium gray value across the whole thing that it's still not looking very natural at this point in time. All right, so a better route would be to go into this alpha channel. Now, this is where you're going to get screwed up if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. Remember, we have a selection, and we hid that selection. So if I want to go in and start adjusting the levels on this, what I'm doing at this point in time is I'm adjusting the levels inside of that selection. And you can see stuff starting to get a little grainy looking. So when you're doing this, make sure that you deselect, that you don't have that selection on there anymore. Now, I just did a deselect by Control D. Now, if I undo that, you can hit Control H to see if you do have something selected. But, because we hide the selection, then sometimes you forget that it's there. So do keep that in mind. All right, so I will Control D to deselect, and I will now do a Control L for levels or adjustments into levels. And I'll go ahead and start to adjust some of this information in here. And what I'm after is just to get a really strong variance of what I want to strip away. Now, right now, if you look at this, you can see I'm going to strip away a lot of paint inside of this area. I'm not going to strip away anything inside of this crack right here. But the point is I'm really going in and limiting what is going to be stripped away, as opposed to that overall medium gray tone that we had across here. And I'll show you both. So there's where we were. Again, a lot going to be stripped away. And there's where we are now. Let's try this two different ways. Let's go ahead and do this as is. So I will go ahead and Control click on there to bring up the selection. Control H again to hide it. And I will jump in here. And you can see that I do still have that information inside of there. So I probably should undo a few times before I did all of that. All right, so there we are now. We're going to have to jump back into channels again here. I'm going to deselect, go into channels, L for levels. I'll again bring these in to clamp all that down. That's fine. And now I'll bring up that selection, jump into layers, jump into here, hide that. All right, so now I have my selection hidden. I have my logo layer selected, and I'm just going to hit delete. And you can see there, now granted, we stripped a lot of stuff away here, but notice how much more natural this looks being stripped away by the texture itself. Of course, this is the exact opposite of what I actually want to accomplish. So I will undo that. What I want to accomplish is I want to strip away in this wet area right here is what I want. So I'll go ahead and Control-I to invert that. Now, you notice that it got a little funky when I inverted it. Again, that's because I have my selection still. I'm telling you, this will mess you up. So Control-D to deselect. Now Control-I, and you can see it did it correctly. So not seeing those marching ants, man, you do this all day long and it'll still mess you up. You just never get used to it. All right, so let's go ahead and select that, hide it, jump into our layer here, and let's go ahead and delete that. And you can see now we've really started deleting some of the stuff inside of those cracks, which I think makes a lot more sense. Now, you'll notice that we did strip a lot. What if you didn't want to strip all of this away? Well, there's another way. Rather than just hitting delete, now we could go in and grab our eraser brush. Even with this one, I think now, we could go in and maybe utilize this one. It still looks a little Photoshop-y, but I think you get the idea. I think a good thing to do as well, maybe let's undo this. If you wanted to just use a normal brush and get away from this feeling that we have here, I'll jump in and just grab just a decent sized brush here, nice and feathered out, pull this down a bit, and now we can start to just kind of do this and get a little bit more of a variance across the surface. So nice way to strip that away. All right, so that's enough on that. I got one more thing in this lesson here, and I'm going to go ahead and close this and close this one, and we don't need this any longer. I just want to talk a little bit more about some blend mode stuff and just how you can deal with more texturing effect with that. All right, so let's open up, let's see, we'll open up this one, and we'll do that one. So we'll just open up a couple of different files here that have just some overall goofy looking texture stuff, and just again want to talk about some stuff that we can do with, let's do that one, with texturing and the overall function of using these blend modes. All right, so let's take this one and let's scale these down a little bit just so we can see what's going on. Now, the whole point of this little section of the demo that I'm going to do here, again, is just to kind of show just some possibilities of some stuff that we can do. Now, this texture right here, it's not bad, and it looks a little weathered, but what if we want a surface like this that's really weathered? So what I'm going to do is, I like the texture on this one. We have some really nice variance in tone on this. I'll drag this one over, and I'm going to go ahead and just pop that in there like so. And let's go through like we did before and just kind of play with some of these blend modes and just see what we get out of these. So you notice some of them are going to lighten the surface up. Some of them are going to darken it down a little bit. So I really like what's going on with this soft light. That's cool. Get some really nasty stuff looking there. Even into like difference, hue, saturation, color. I kind of like that soft light. That was nice. So here's where we are before, and here's where we are after. And maybe that's too much. Maybe we don't want that much. Well, you always have opacity that you can pull up and down. So maybe about there. So there's before and there's after. So it just adds a nice subtle tint to that. Well, maybe we really want to grunge this thing up. So let's take this one and let's add it on top of it. And we'll have to scale this one a little bit. So maybe we'll just use the whole thing here. All right, so once again, let's jump in and start playing with this. That's a great texture right there. So there's before, there's after. That was multiply. Now we're into lightning. Overlay. Ooh, I like that one. Ooh, there's soft light again. Looks like I like soft light on both of those. So there's before, there's after. You know, again, we can play with the opacity on this. So a lot of stuff you can do on this. Now, let's say that we wanted to further this kind of dripping coming off the top. Stuff like this is great for that. And this was shot, just a photograph converted to grayscale. Some adjustments were made to this in the levels just to pull out to make this pure white and this dark. But stuff like this, again, just shot from a normal photograph is great for this. So we'll bring this over, pop it down on here, and we'll just go like so. That's fine. Double click there. Now on this one, we can try some different things. Multiply seems to work out the best. Multiply is going to get rid of the white areas essentially on this. So keep that in mind when you're doing these. For example, if you wanted to utilize this right here, you could convert this to grayscale, turn this to a more pure white via levels. Levels are easy to do. And then you can get that in there. Now, you will notice that here I actually do have a little bit of a problem. I need to erase this edge right here, and it looks like you can see that edge down below here. So you'd want to get rid of that, obviously. And, you know, maybe it's too much. Maybe we pull that back a little bit and adjust the opacity on that. But, again, great way to really grime up a surface. All right, so we've got one more little demo that I want to show, and it's kind of along the same lines of this one. Let's jump back into Maya. And I want to open up a project here. And in this project, we have just a basic plane. We're just kind of saying that we have a logo on a wall here that we want to really grime up. So we want maybe a nice grimy cement that's been nice and weathered, and we've got stuff that's going to be coming off of these logos from these letters. You've got weathering that occurs. You got rain that's happening, and it's probably rusting the back side of this lettering, and it's running down, that sort of thing. So the real purpose of this demo that I want to show is just positioning things. Now, a couple of different things that you can do here. Let's turn off our grid. And we'll turn on wireframe unshaded. So our texture, we're not going to worry about the letters at this point. We're just texturing this back plane here. Couple different things you can do. One, you can do a print screen of this. So on your keyboard, if you're on Windows, you would just hit the print screen button. Now on Apple, I believe it's like Control-Shift-4 or something like that. I don't remember. But you can do a print screen on there. Now, oddly enough, I'm actually working on an Apple keyboard on a Windows machine on this particular workstation. So I cannot do a print screen with an Apple keyboard on a Windows machine. So if that's the case for you, I'll show you another way that you can actually do this. I'm going to go ahead and just shoot a render of this thing. So I'll go into my render settings, and I'm going to bump this up a bit. So maybe I'll do a 2048 render. And we'll check our render settings. Doesn't really make any difference. I'll go ahead and view my res gate, just so I can position this inside of here. And I want to make sure I'm not outside of the gate. I want to make sure everything is inside. So that looks good about there. Now, inside of Hypershade, what I'm going to do is generate a new texture. I have my gray Lambert on the background here. So probably what I will do is just make two new Lamberts. And the first one I'll go ahead and make pure black. Second one I will make pure white. And I will go ahead and pop these on here. So I get this. I have pure black and I have pure white at this point in time. We'll see what this does. We may run into a problem. We'll probably get an alpha channel. We'll see what it does. My point is if I have a black background on here, it's going to be hard to distinguish where the background ends and this plane starts. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to go ahead and render current frame, and we'll wait for this thing to spit out. So there's our image. Now we do have an alpha channel in there that I think we can utilize in Photoshop, and that's fine. So I will go ahead and save this image, and I'll just go ahead and save that to the desktop for now, and we'll call this wall temp just because it's just a temporary file, just so I know where that wall is. I'm going to save this as a TIFF file. Alright, we'll save that out, close that, and we'll jump into Photoshop. We'll go ahead and keep all these files open because we'll just utilize these since we have them open. And maybe we'll just do it on this texture right here. That's fine since we're already working on that. Alright, so I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to open up that wall temp. So there's what we have. Now, a couple different things that we can do. Because we rendered this out very specifically from the front view, we know we don't have any perspective on this because it was from the front view. What we can do is we can go into channels. I can grab this channel like so and load that. And then what I can do is actually go up to image crop, and it'll crop it at that selection. So now I know that my image is cropped to exactly the size that I need it to go. Let's see what our image size is. And we've got 1921 by 1516. We'll go ahead and constrain the proportions of that. And we will just say that, for lack of a better term, that we will be rendering out, say, a 1K image inside of Maya. So we know that this doesn't need to be wider than a 1K image. So we'll go 1024. And there we have the area that we need to work on for this texture. Okay, so back in layers, I'm going to go ahead and dupe this. So now we have this as a background layer. And I will rename this overlay just so I know what that is. And I'll go ahead and turn that off for now. And we'll go ahead and take this texture again, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it over to here. And pardon me, I grabbed the wrong one, so I will delete that. And I specifically want this one on there. And it looks like that texture is not quite big enough, so I'm going to need to go in and pull that over to there. I'll go ahead and merge that down. And I think what I might do is go ahead and just, for speed, go ahead and just clone this out. I know I said that this is a bad thing to do, but for time on this video, I'm going to go ahead and just do that just to generate a texture on there. We'll probably cover it up with grime anyway, so it probably won't really make a whole lot of difference. Alright, so now the purpose of this overlay that we have right here, if I turn this back on, is we can do things. I'll probably just lower the opacity on it, but now I can see where this lettering actually lies. So I can go in and put all of my stuff dripping down from it, and it will actually be in the correct position. So go ahead and close that one down, and I'll just do this very, very quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'll go ahead and pull this one over, and again, Control T. I kind of liked what I had before, so maybe we'll kind of go for that kind of feel on it. And I'll pull this down. We're going to turn this off for now, the overlay layer, since we don't really need it. And I liked overlay on that one. Maybe I'll pull it down just a little bit. Actually, I think it was soft light that I liked. Okay, maybe we'll pull this up a little bit more. And, you know, if we wanted to, we could pull this one in, scale this down a little bit. Actually, quite a bit. So maybe we'll just get a nice subtle one out of this one. I think it was soft light that I liked on that one. So there you go. Maybe I'll pull this opacity down just a little bit. All right, so like where that's going. Maybe I want some stuff kind of piled up down at the bottom. Maybe the ground is down here and a lot of dirt has gotten kicked up on this. So maybe I'll jump in here and grab the bottom portion of this one and pull it down. Maybe we'll scale that a little bit. So kind of the point here is there's a lot of stuff that you can utilize, rust and dirt. You just kind of have to use your imagination to get this stuff the way that it needs to look. I mean, you know, this looks like dirt to me, even though this is rust. But we can use that as dirt if we want to. So finding this stuff on the web is really easy as well. So you have a lot of stuff out there. All right, I'll double click that. Now, this one's going to be a little harder. If you'll notice, if I go in and I start to use some of my blend modes here, this one's all right. You know, that's not too bad. It looks like rust. It doesn't look like dirt to me, so that's a problem. And as I go through here, you notice I'm getting some cool blending, but I have this harsh line up here. Now, let's say we go with soft light on this one. Now, we've got the hard edge right there. If I was to grab a eraser brush, and I will go in here, I'll start to delete some of this. The problem is again, it's just going to look photoshopped. You know, if you go in here and try to do that, it just looks terrible. So let's undo that. Now, a better out again, like we talked before. Go in and grab this image. Let's go to normal so we can see what it looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image Adjustments, and I'm going to go into Hue and Saturation. Now, inside of Hue and Saturation, I can completely desaturate this image. So I'm just pulling all the saturation out of it, so no color information. And now I can go into levels. Again, that was Control L. And I can adjust some of this stuff inside of here to get this to more of a pure white up on top there. So kind of like where that's going. We can erase some of this. So let's go about there. And now if I go in and I do, say, a soft light, we can get a very, very different effects. Now, you'll notice at this point with soft light, I like how this is blending here, but we're not getting as good of a blend here. If you remember from the previous little section, I said that if you use a multiply blend mode, that is actually going to get rid of white in that image. So you'll notice, though, however, by doing that, we're getting a lot darker looking texture down here as opposed to soft light, where we're getting more of a kind of light dirt looking texture. So let's take this back up to multiply. And you can see we got rid of most of it. We probably should go in and get rid of a little bit more of this stuff inside of here. And at this point, that's not too hard to do just because we have leveled the white out on this so well. So looks like great dirt coming through here. So that works out quite nicely. Now, let's say that we like the look of this brown throughout here, but, pardon me, but we still want to utilize this multiply. We can actually go in and adjust this image back inside of that hue and saturation. So I'll go back in here. Now, because we have black and white, saturation is going to do absolutely nothing whatsoever. That's not going to do anything for us. And changing the hue or the overall color isn't going to do anything as well, because you can't change the hue of black and white. It is black and white. However, we can colorize this. So if I hit colorize, then essentially what that is doing is taking all those darker values and it is making them the hue that is specified here. So we could start to get into some more green, mossy looking effects. And, you know, again, this is a very good thing to point out, that we took rust and made it look like moss. So you got to keep your eye open and pay attention, again, to just things that look like other things, and utilize those textures. So rust, dirt, whatever, you can make it look like a lot of different things. So I'll go ahead and just hit OK on that. We'll just say that we like that. All right, so enough on that one. Let's start talking about the logo a little bit here and where that is setting. So I like this one, just having this stuff dripping down from where this logo is. And again, you know, this logo, all this lettering is going to be a metal texture more than likely. It's going to use bolts and things to mount this on the back of to the wall, to mount the letter to the wall. And those bolts probably over a good amount of time, especially if we have enough moisture to generate this moss down here, we are probably going to have a lot of moisture. It's going to rust those bolts out and it's going to run down the wall. So we'll utilize this one. Go ahead and dump that in there, and we'll use that multiply. And I'll go ahead and zoom in here just a little bit just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and just roughly place this at the top of the letters, just somewhere around there. That's fine. Now the method that I'm showing here is a fairly quick way of doing this. You can make it look a lot better if you spend a little bit more time than I'm going to here. I'm just going to do this very quickly just for the sake of time on this video. All right, so double click that. So you can see that is basically in a position. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that layer like so. And we'll go ahead and pull this down. So we've got the top lettering and we have the bottom lettering. So the bottom lettering, I'll go ahead and scale this in a little bit. Now to keep this from looking the same, I'll go ahead and reverse it. So I'll just grab these scale handles and pull them across like so. That way it doesn't end up looking the same as the one up above it since we duped it. All right, so you got your top ones, you got your bottom ones. We'll turn our bottom ones off. And I'm going to go ahead and pull the opacity up on this a little bit just so we can see a little bit better of what we're doing. And now it's just a matter of going in here and kind of emulating what would happen if this stuff is running down. First off, I'm going to pull this down a little bit. And I'm going to grab my eraser brush, scale that down a little bit, and I can start to strip some of this away. And, you know, again, we wouldn't have this right here. That just wouldn't happen because no water would collect there to generate that. However, we might get a little bit down in here, so it might be kind of fun to leave some of this down in that crevice right there. Maybe some along the edges here. And, you know, you got to spend some time on this, a lot more than I'm going to end up spending on this one. So we'll kind of leave some of that collecting in some of those areas. A little bit in there. Probably some of that would drip down there. So just strip some of this away. Like so. We definitely wouldn't have that hard edge there. Maybe some of it would drip down like that. All right, now coming off of these areas, we can probably do some of the same basic idea of stripping some of this away so we get it just dripping off these areas. Again, I'm going to do this really quick here. So you need to study your reference material. You need to pay attention to where water's going to collect and where it's going to run down. I'll go ahead and jump into this one. And very, very quickly here. Actually, first thing I'm going to do is move this down a little bit. Like so. Grab my eraser. And again, you would want to get rid of a lot of these areas through here. I'm using the Shift key to constrain my, of course I keep holding Shift, so it's going from there to there. Make sure you click first and then hit Shift. Just to kind of strip some of this off of here in a pattern that looks like, you know, maybe rain came down here. Alright, so we'll soften some of these areas up. Get rid of some of that in there. All right, we'll go ahead and leave that for now. I mean, like I said, obviously you're going to want to spend a lot more time than I just did on that, but for the sake of time, we will run with that. All right, so we obviously don't want this overlay on there. We just want our texture. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we'll jump into our folder here. And we'll just call this something wall logo color. We want to save it as a TIFF. We don't want any alphas or layers in there. We just want the color information. And I'll go ahead and save this. Don't want compression on it. And I'll jump back into Maya. And inside of here, we'll go to our perspective view. Turn off wireframe unshaded, and we'll jump in Hypershade really quick. And we'll go ahead and make a new texture. And very quickly, I will pop that color in there, just so we can see that that all indeed lines up. So, just to repeat a little bit, you can do the screen grab in Windows. Print screen on your keyboard will do it in Windows. You'll have to check on Mac. I think it's like Control-Shift-4 or 3 or something like that. But regardless, either direction, when you do that, it will save it into the clipboard, and then when you go into Photoshop and you hit paste, it will paste that information that you saved. Or you can do a quick render just like I just did, and you can get that information as well. Either way you do it, really good way to line that stuff up. All right, in our next lecture, we'll go into something a little bit more specific, project-based. We're going to do a crate, and we'll talk about living the life of that object and making sure that all of that grime and wearing has a very specific purpose. But that's it for now.